Hello, everyone live here in the office and on WebEx. My name is Megan Hennigan, and I am manager of the training unit here at JCOB. I know a lot of you. So before we actually get started, I'm just watching today, but I did want to make an announcement, and I want to poll everybody. We are looking for topics for upcoming ethics forums. This is our fun repeat one because it's so popular and new people are always coming on. But we have done lots of forums, and we need some ideas. So I wanted you all to think about it during this time, and maybe we can take a few minutes at the end if you all have thought about something then, or you can email education@jcob.ny.gov for ideas later, and we'll try to figure out what you all need to know about. All right, thank you.
All right, fantastic. So thank you. Welcome everybody who is here. We have a small group here. We have a large group online. Today's forum is a systems training, and what we're really aiming to do is give you enough working knowledge about how to use the FDS system so that you can survive the various tasks that you've been assigned in it. Today's audience should be comprised of people who are either ethics officers named in the system or people who have the role of agency contact. And both of those system-assigned roles give you permissions in the system to be able to update filers and make changes, add information, and things like that. So what we're really aiming for today is to give you kind of a crash course, a big overview on what the system is designed for and how to operate it. It is here so that you can get your questions answered. So I'm going to be addressing this in 3 different sections. The first section we're going to be talking about is how to manage the various aspects of FDS filers. So we're going to give you just a brief conceptual overview of the whole process of financial disclosure filings. We will talk about the key tasks that ethics officers are asked to perform. And when I say ethics officers, what I mean by that is ethics officers are the ones that are ultimately responsible for seeing that these things are done. But ethics officers are also empowered to delegate these tasks to various staff members. And so you may be sitting there going, oh, but I'm just an agency contact. That doesn't relate to me. But anything that we say is a responsibility of an ethics officer may in fact be a task that gets delegated to those of you who are in the crowd. So don't tune out just because I say this is an ethics officer thing, all right? If ethics officer isn't your title, it may still be your thing. But then we're going to have some frequently asked questions about the FDS system. Questions that people ask on a regular basis, and we kind of have a sense about where you have questions. So what we're going to ask is that you save questions at the end of each section. I'll see if anybody has any questions that pertain to that section, but each of these sections we're going to end with common questions. So hold off, because chances are we may answer your question before you would need to ask it, all right? But then we're going to move into the brief overview of ethics training. So we'll talk about what that training requirement is and how training activities are tracked in the FDS system. And again, we'll have those FAQs. And then the third section is going to be the system orientation. I'm literally going to walk you through every menu item, which sounds really tedious, but I'm going to go really fast. But just to give you a sense, some of you may be very familiar with the system, and this is kind of a refresher. Some of you may not have really had much exposure to the system at all. So it's going to just be an overview of the functions of the system, some of which you may be familiar with, some of which you may not be, and that's the whole point of being here today. So let's start with an overview of financial disclosure, what it is, who's required to file. A lot of people are required to file the financial disclosure forms. Over 30,000 people statewide are required to file financial disclosures. And for most people, it's because they meet one of 2 different criteria. Either they're working in a job title that your agency has designated as being a policymaker, or maybe they're not a policymaker, but their job title gives them a salary that exceeds a certain salary threshold. And that's pinned to the CSEA salary grade 24. And that is true regardless of whether your filers belong to CSEA or any particular union. It's there because we need to have some sort of benchmark, so that's what it is. Currently, the job rate for CSEA job rate 24, it's going up, and it's going to go up to $101,379. So as of April 1st, That's going to be the salary threshold that people need. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. So just one thing to keep in mind, because sometimes filers get confused. The new filers are unfamiliar with this. They're going to have lots of questions. They're going to be filing for the previous year. This is a backward-looking document. So if they say to you, but I wasn't even a filer last year, yep, that's right. That's what this document does, and that's just one of those things that you just sometimes have to explain to people. So the salary threshold rates, they do go up from year to year. We're right at the end of our chart right now. So as of April 1st, as you can see, the salary threshold is going to go from $99,394 up to $101,397. So that's a task that is going to be on the agencies, is to look at their list of people who are threshold filers and find out whether or not they are still a threshold filer when the rate goes up. So that is one of the tests. Now, we do expect that sometime in 2020, CSEA is going to start contract negotiations for the next round. So stay tuned. If you have a lot of people who are salary threshold filers, we all have to pay attention to these numbers. All right, so one question is, are part-time employees required to file? And it does kind of depend. It depends on whether or not they are voluntarily reducing their hours in order to skate below that salary threshold. That doesn't work. But if they're hired at a part-time job that is intended to be a part-time job, they're not designated as a policymaker, and their part-time salary won't exceed the threshold, then no, they don't have to file. But if it's really a full-time job that they're electing to take part-time, then yes, they might be required to file. So in those kind of situations, if you have a question about that, give us a call. We'd be happy to walk you through it and make sure that those folks are accounted for. Now, filing deadlines definitely depends on where you're working and who you are. For the large majority of people, May 15th is the filing deadline, and that is for everybody who's considered a non-academic filer. So the large majority of people have a May 15th deadline. But there is a small group of people called academic filers. These are generally our SUNY and CUNY professors, where May 15th is right in the middle of their the finals week and graduation week and things like that. So academic filers, they have a November 15th filing deadline. So for majority of agencies, this is irrelevant, but for the CUNYs and SUNYs, pay attention to that, because you may in fact have two different filing deadlines and two different task lists to manage. Now, filers who are brand new, when you just add a new filer, when the general rule is when they have to file is within 30 days. So you have a brand new staff member who is hired, you determine that they're going to be an FDS filer. Generally speaking, they have 30 days to file from when they're added to the system. But because of the way the system processes things, there may be a little bit of a delay. If they're added, if for non-academic filers for most people, if they're added from now, from January to April 15th, then they're going to have a May 15th deadline, but everybody else has 30 days from the time that they're added. Academic filers has a little bit larger window. So generally speaking, you can tell new filers they have 30 days to file. Now, one thing that filers can do is they can request an extension of time to file. It's sort of like doing your taxes. If you can't get your taxes done on time, yes, you can request an extension. But just like with your taxes, you have to request your extension by your filing due date. So if you're a May 15th or a November 15th filer, that's the deadline to request an extension. Now, we prefer that people request extensions by logging into their profile in the FDS system and requesting an extension directly from within their profile. But there is also a form available on our website, the application for extension form. Filers can use that as well. Sometimes we get people who are a little computer phobic and need a little hand holding. So if they can't figure out how to request an extension through their profile, you can always just send them to the website so that they can get that application form. Now, there is a mechanism for some filers to request to be exempt from having to file to begin with. So just opt out of the whole thing. This is only available for those salary threshold filers. It is not available for anybody who is designated as a policymaker. I'm sorry, if you're a policymaker, you have to file, full stop. But if you're a threshold filer, or you have these threshold filers, they can request an exemption, and that exemption request is also a function of their profile. They can log into their profile and request that. There is also a form, an individual exemption application form on our website. An ethics officer can also request an exemption. Exemptions can be kind of tricky things. They're not granted automatically. They're definitely examined on a case-by-case basis. We need enough information about the filer and their job to be able to make a determination about whether or not an exemption is appropriate on a case-by-case basis. But for some people who are threshold filers and they get really antsy about having to do an FDS, at least there is something that you can kind of dangle for them. Exemptions hold for as long as somebody is in that exempt, as long as they're in that title, unless something changes, pretty much, right? So they're exempt unless they get put into a new title that is not exempt, in which case they're a filer again. Or if they're in a position but their job duties substantially change, that might require them to reapply for an exemption or lose it. If they get designated as a policymaker, policymakers have to file. Or if the commission does a review of title exemptions and decides that those exemptions are no longer appropriate. Some of you may be aware that we just finished doing a complete realign of title exemptions. Titles change over the years, and our list had not changed in a long time. So a lot of people have lost their exemptions this year and are in the process of reapplying. If you've got people who are a little bit nervous about that or have questions about that, you can always refer them to us. We'll help you through it. All right, so key tasks for ethics officers. What do ethics officers have to do in this process? So first of all, review and certification. This is a really big, important task of the ethics officers, and it's legally mandated that once a year, by the end of February, so first of all, I should say, there is 2 sets of due dates depending on whether you're dealing with your regular filers or your academic faculty members, all right? So for most people, I'm going to be addressing the main deadlines. But one of the most important tasks is once a year to review everybody in your agency who is designated as an FDS filer and verify that their information is accurate. That can be a very big task depending on the size of your agency and the number of filers. But that is the really big lift. We can't enforce these filing requirements until you tell us who those filers are. So that's the really big important one. So once a year, you have to review your list of filers and then certify to us that that filer list is complete and accurate. You also have an important job to update that information throughout the year regularly. Anytime there's a change in a filer's status, you have, within 30 days, you have to notify us by updating their information in the FDS system. Also, an important task of ethics officers is to open up and maintain ongoing communication with your filers about their responsibilities to file and their responsibilities to attend ethics training as a result of being a filer. We also play an important role in notifying filers of these obligations, but we have found through hard experience that it is best that it starts at the agency level. They don't even know who we are until you have notified them that these are their legal obligations. So we really do depend on agencies to be the first line of communications on a lot of this materials. Usually it happens right at onboarding when you're first hiring new staff and letting them know what their obligations are, and we step in sometime later into that process. So important dates. Now we've given you a number of handouts, and one of them is important dates that outlines these key tasks. So the first step is you should have already received notice. Did the notice go out? Okay. You should have received notice that this is the time to start reviewing and modifying your active filer list. So we sent out a little heads up saying, hey, it's time to start reviewing your list. If there's any changes, please start making those changes. Any information that was missed from the previous year, any new information that has gotten added recently and it hasn't been updated yet, this is the time that you should be working on that. And I'm sorry, and I don't want to neglect our academic filers. This happens in August for the SUNY CUNY campuses for their faculty members, but right now we're in the thick of this for the large majority of filers. Now, all of this review is aimed towards the all-important legal certification, where you have to certify that your list is complete and accurate. And that certification has to be completed by the end of February. Is it February, not 29th in a leap year?
We're sticking with February 28th.
We're sticking with February 28th regardless of leap year. So February 28th it is. I was just wondering because it just occurred to me that this is leap year. We actually have a February 29th this year. But by February 28th, you'll have to certify. And I'll show you in the system where to do that. Once your review of your list is done, the certification really is just clicking a button within the system. But it is an important step, and don't overlook that. So you'll have to click that button by the end of February. If you're dealing with your faculty members, that is by the end of September. And just keep in mind, throughout the year, anytime you have a new filer, they have to be added to the system within 30 days of hire. Keep that list updated as you go along through the year, and that actually makes your certification go a lot easier too if you're doing this regular update. All right, so notifications, important part of what we're asking for is notifications. And notifications means opening up those lines of communication with your filers, right? So you should, as a part of your process, build into your HR onboarding process notifications that will notify your new staff member that they're going to be subject to financial disclosure rules and what that might look like for them, and that all people who are subject to financial disclosure rules are also required to take ongoing, regular, live ethics training. So you should be explaining this to them before you add them to the system. And I say that because it depends on how you are setting up your onboarding processes. When you add a new profile to the FDS system, it automatically will trigger some notifications that get sent via email to the filer. Don't let that be the very first thing they ever see or hear about being a filer. And that's why we say, tell them before you create that profile that they're going to be subject to this, because otherwise they get a random ethics training email and they think it's spam. They don't even know what it is. So make sure that you are communicating with them about that. We send out a notice to file to all of the filers, depending on when their filing due date is. So by mid-April, for the vast majority of filers, by mid-April, we send them out a notice. So basically a month before their filing is due, we send out a notice saying, hey, this is the month, it's time for you to log into the system and file your disclosure. For our SUNY, CUNY faculty, it's October 15th, all right? Now, one important thing to note is that these notices that are sent out, because they are sent out to such a large group of people, we use a public delivery email service. It's a no-reply email server. So you also want to make sure that your filers have important contact information from us, because if they just reply to that, they're not going to get anywhere. It's a no-reply email. All right. So deadlines, there are important deadlines, and again, these are in your handouts. So there's deadlines for filing the financial disclosure form, the deadline for filing an exemption, or the deadline for filing an extension are all the same date. So if most of your people are May 15th filers, those are the deadlines for exemption and extension requests, November 15th for your academic filers. All right, now I said it's an important legal requirement for ethics officers to annually certify that the information on their lists are correct. But that also means it's not just in the month of January and certify by February. This is an ongoing requirement as part of Public Officers Law, Section 73A, that requires ethics officers to update the FDS system. Basically, you're notifying us anytime something changes that's relevant to your FDS filing. So you have within 30 days to notify us, and you notify us by making those changes in the FDS system. We really utterly depend on you for accurate and timely information, because, you know, if there's a change and they're no longer a filer, but our system still shows that they're a filer and now they're delinquent on a filing, they're going to start getting letters that are going to be worrisome for them, and it's all because you didn't update them. So please just make sure that you have some sort of process in place to, you know, keep our best practices in the past have shown that you've got to make sure that you have a nice clear line of communications with human resources and have established procedures for making sure that any kind of changes get filtered through and updated into the system. So that's going to look different depending on your agency and the staff resources that you have for it, but those are necessary steps. All right, now, in the realm of filer notifications, how important it is to communicate with them. One of the things that we've noticed is that you really need to target your communications only to FDS filers. Agencies who have done kind of global emails to all staff end up regretting it because people who aren't filers come back going, wow, what's going on? And people who are filers just tune it out because they don't think that they think it's just junk mail, right? Now, there is a place within the FDS system that will allow you to create distribution lists that give all of your active filers with their email address. Makes it super easy for you to be able to target these communications to specific groups of people. So I will show you how to do that when we get to that part. So just be the point of contact. Pretty please. Now, there are some special circumstances, particularly for filers who are members of boards, councils, commissions, authorities. These are usually your non-employee volunteers who are appointed to these commissions. They are, because they're on these policymaking boards, they are policymakers, so they are subject to financial disclosure rules. So you still do have to notify them of filing requirements, but because these people aren't necessarily regular staff members, they may require extra attention to make sure that they are being reached, all right? Now, if they filed an FDS form with the appointments office, that might be sufficient. They can just provide us with a copy. So if you have any questions about these special groups of people, your board commission members, give us a call. We'll help you figure out what they need. You may also have some filers who file with the New York City Conflict of Interest Board. That's fine. If they file with COIB, they can provide that disclosure to us, and that would satisfy it. We don't necessarily need to have people filing multiple disclosures if it's going to all cover the same information. So if you have people who say, but I already filed, check to see if they hit one of those criteria or give us a call. We'll help you through it. Okay, so these are some of the more common questions here that we have. First of all, what do I do when I'm adding a new filer? What credentials do I use? Now, the important thing to know is that everyone needs to have an ny.gov account in order to get access to the FDS system, all right? But how you get an ny.gov account does depend on where you work. So for most state employees, there is somebody in HR who can issue those ny.gov accounts, right? Those are called directory services credentials, and they're established by your agency. But not all agencies do have that service, particularly SUNY and CUNY. SUNY employees have their own special SUNY ID. So the SUNY ID that starts with SUNY, that's what those folks are going to use. CUNY employees do not. CUNY employees do not have directory services ID. So those staff members are going to have to create a personal ny.gov account, and that account is used. It doesn't have to be an agency-issued ny.gov account. It can be a personal account. You just need to have one way or the other. So for those members who are serving on authorities, commissions, and boards, it kind of depends. If your agency can issue them an ny.gov account, that's fine. If not, they just have to create their own ny.gov account. If somebody's creating a personal ny.gov account, they just need to then give it to you so that you can create their profile and give them access to the system. All right, so people often wonder, what do the designations mean? Because when you are adding a profile, if you're creating a new profile for somebody, you have to say what kind of filer they are. And that's what the designation is designed for, is to say what kind of filer there are, because different rules for different filers sometimes. So the two big ones are the first two. The first is a policymaker, and this is, again, a determination made by the agency. The agency decides which of its titles are going to be considered policymakers. And I just want to say, as a former English teacher, my disclaimer is the designation in the system is two words, policymaker, and I am very much aware that policymaker is, in fact, one word.
Thank you.
Just saying. Some of us grammar people, things like that burn just a little bit. But so I have it here because that's how the designation looks in the system, policymaker, two words, even though it really is one word, and I'm sorry for that, all right? But that's what the designation means. The second designation, the most common one, is the threshold filers. Threshold over. Those are the people whose salary is over that filing threshold, CSEA salary grade 24. The next designation is ethics denied, and that means that somebody has applied for an exemption and we've reviewed their circumstances and decided that it's not appropriate for them to receive that exemption. So ethics denied really means an exemption was denied for that person. Agency objections, this is a designation that is moving towards being obsolete, but you may still see it. It means that we have granted an exemption, but the agency disagrees with that. The exemption still holds, but their designation reflects that we should pay attention to that. Now, former threshold filer, many of you may actually need to start using this one now as you are going over your certification list. A former threshold over is a person who had been a filer because their salary had been above the threshold, but it's a new year and the threshold went up and their salary is now below that threshold. So they're no longer a filer because they are now below the salary threshold. So you're going to go into those people's profile and you're going to change their designation to former threshold and over. That makes them inactive, they're no longer a filer, and it gets them off of your lists, and it's a good thing for everybody. Former policymaker, very similar, and that's pretty much self-explanatory. Somebody who had been a filer because they were a policymaker, now they're no longer a policymaker. Either the title was changed so that they're not a policymaker, or they maybe changed jobs. As long as their salary is still below the threshold, they become a former policymaker. Again, it makes them an inactive filer, and they're off of everybody's list. The designation academic filer, I've mentioned this already, those are the SUNY and CUNY professors, and we need that designation to be accurate because you've seen they have a whole different set of filing due dates and deadlines. So if you are a CUNY or SUNY person, make sure that your professors have the appropriate designation so that they get filing notices when they need them. And of course, former academic filer, that's kind of self-explanatory. They had been they had been over the threshold, now they're below the threshold, so they are now a former academic filer. That's the designations. If you have any further questions, let me know. But here we go. Here's some of the other common questions. We have people in titles that were ethics denied. All right, so these were people who had applied and it was denied. But if we have a new employee with one of these titles, is ethics denied the designation to be added for that person, or should we put in threshold filer? So in this kind of situation, if you have a title that either has an exemption or has been denied an exemption, but a new staff member is hired into that same title, you apply that title designation to that filer. It may mean that they're not currently required to file, depending on their designation, but you want to make sure that you do add a profile for them and put in the appropriate designation so that they can be tracked appropriately, even if they're not actively required to file, depending on their designation. So if you have any questions about what kind of designation to put for a filer, though, give us a call. Usually those questions are a pretty quick phone call. We can help you figure that out. We would rather have you give us a call and let us help you through it than to screw up people's profiles that have unintended consequences. People get very upset when there's mistakes made in this, and we want to make sure that we help people by being accurate. All right, so I've already mentioned this briefly, but here's where we can really see it. How should we handle filers who were above the old filing threshold, but now are below the new filing threshold? The filing threshold changes as of April 1st. So, and remember, these filing threshold people, they're not policymakers. If you've got non-policymakers whose annual salary in 2020 is below 101,379, that's that new threshold, then you're going to change the designation of those people to former threshold and over. Right? They were a threshold filer, but now they're below that threshold, so you're going to change it to former threshold. Once you change that designation, they become inactive, and we stop sending them letters asking them to file. So it's a win-win. And there's often questions, well, what do I do in between? Because it's January now, but the threshold changes in April. You can cease FDS onboarding or compliance efforts if you know that they are going to be below this threshold, right? We don't necessarily want to make them a filer for 3 months and have them all excited. Is that right? They can, I'm just checking with our FDS manager. All right, so next question. How do we delete records of employees who have retired or otherwise left the agency, right? You want them off your list. They're gone. All right, so important to know, we can't delete anything. We have records retention policies. We have to keep records for at least 7 years. But what you do to get them off your list is you make them inactive. And there's a number of different changes that you can make to a filer's profile that will make them inactive and make them drop off your list. So you go to the filer's dashboard, and I will show you when we do the system training, but there's a little pencil that allows you to edit their information. Generally speaking, when somebody has retired or left service, you're going to be editing the agency section of the field, and there's a job status drop-down box that you can indicate that they have left service or retired. You put in the date of their retirement and update, and they are off your list. We thank you very much for your timeliness in updating that information. So I'll show you that when we look at the system. How do I indicate if one of my filers goes on leave? Same process. You're going to go to the filer's profile page. You're going to edit the information, and in that job status drop-down box, one option is that they go on leave. And then there's a field that gives effective date of leave. This is really important for people who are going out on leave to notify us through the system that they are on leave, because we're going to suspend enforcement actions while somebody is on leave, right? But if somebody is on like a 6-month maternity leave, they don't want to be nagged by us while they are, taking care of business, right? But it's also important for you to establish some sort of process to keep track of those people on leave, because when they return from leave, it's really important that you then update the system to tell us that they are back from leave. It does a number of things. At least in the training world, it will automatically extend any kind of training deadlines based on the leave dates that you put in there. So it is important that you notify us through the system when people leave and return from any kind of leaves. All right, so keep in mind. How does a collective bargaining unit make requests for exemptions on behalf of their members? This is something that can happen, but doesn't happen very often, I don't think, right?
No, it doesn't.
Now, but a union can request that a specific job title be exempt. But they're going to make that request the same way an ethics officer would do, which is there is a form that can be filed that requests this exemption and offers rationale, and you have to, again, provide enough information for us to fairly evaluate whether or not that title should be exempt. So if this should happen to come up, just give us a call. We'll walk you through it. It's not that big of a deal. Now, how are title exemptions determined? I kind of indicated it. It is done on a case-by-case basis, but we do have to examine this request against a number of different criteria to determine whether or not it would be appropriate for that exemption to be granted. So if the job title involves contracts, leases, the purchase or sale of real estate, goods or services, anything to do with grants of money or loans, anything to do with the adoption, modification, repeal of regulations or rules, those are the kinds of job titles that probably will not receive an exemption. We do have to be looking at those criteria, because those are the kinds of things that the public has a right to know whether an individual who is engaging in those kinds of job functions could be influenced. And that's the whole point of these disclosures, is to provide transparency to the public about the people who are making important decisions on matters of the state. How are agencies notified about these exemption request determinations? Well, we process them, and once we act on the determination, we note it in the file, so the file is updated immediately, but it also generates emails to both the filer, and a copy is sent to the ethics officer. So ethics officers tend to get a lot of email from the FDS system. Just as an aside, I would say that one way that you can manage the flow of emails is to just set up a separate inbox and just redirect all of your JCOPE emails to that. That way you have the notifications that you need, but it doesn't necessarily flood your inbox with things that you don't need to act on right away. So how is notification made when somebody's status changes from exempt to non-exempt? Well, this one's a little bit trickier because, if you, for example, mark somebody as out on leave, that will make them inactive or exempt. But that doesn't necessarily generate an email to the filer to let them know that their status has changed. There's a lot of different updates that you might make to a filer's status that either activates them or inactivates their profile. So not everything sends an automatic email, but you can always tell whether or not a change has affected a filer by either just looking at the filer's profile or by looking at your list of active filers in your agency. There's also a report that lets you look at the inactive filers in your agency. So if you ever needed to do any kind of cross-checking or you're looking at your list, there are resources in the system that will allow you to do that. All right, well, what happens, we do get this question quite a bit, what happens if they don't file on time? And do we as the agency get in trouble? Filing the FDS is absolutely an important legal obligation for filers. And the consequences mainly fall on the filer for noncompliance, but the agency does have a very important role in encouraging the compliance efforts, all right? So if a filer fails to file, and agencies, by the way, because of confidentiality, we can't just tell agencies that we're having trouble reaching somebody. There's a process first. So at first, if they fail to file their FDS, or if they skip a question or didn't answer one completely, we'll send the filer themselves a 15-day letter. Basically says they have 15 days to correct whatever deficiency was found. You won't necessarily know that they've received a 15-day letter unless they panic and reach out to you and, oh, what do I do about it? However, if the filer fails to respond to that 15-day letter, that's when compliance actions crank up a little bit. And that's when we get the agency involved, because then we're going to send the filer and the agency, the appointing authority, a notice of delinquency, an NOD. Notices of delinquency are legal documents. They are filed and posted on our website. So all of a sudden people become Googleable. So that can sometimes be a motivator that you tell your filers. They don't want to get a notice of delinquency. But that is a legal notice that basically outlines really what their obligations are under the law and the consequences for noncompliance. It's not a pleasant letter. The consequences are they could be subject to a civil penalty. They could be fines of up to $40,000. There's also potential criminal prosecutions for failure to file. So this is the important one. People really need to understand that filing is not optional. That this is a very important legal requirement. All right, now we often get, and ethics officers often get, specific questions about how to answer some of the specific questions that are on the FDS form, all right? We don't necessarily expect ethics officers to be an expert on how to answer this. However, I don't want to necessarily read through all of these because it's kind of getting in the weeds. All of this material, by the way, will be posted to our website, but there is general guidance. Every year, we publish a document that gives specific detailed information on how to answer every single question on the FDS form. What's that called?
It's the FDS Guide.
FDS Guide. How about that? Pretty simple, right? We try not to name things to make them obscure. However, if you have filers who come to you and they seem really confused or concerned about how to answer any particular question, have them reach out to us and ask to speak to a filing specialist. We have very knowledgeable, expert, friendly people who are really good at helping people figure out what their questions are and how to answer them. So just have them give us a call and we'll help them out. All right, so the next section then is ethics training. So the important thing to know is everybody who is required to file a financial disclosure form is also required to attend live ethics training. But the training bone is connected to the filing bone. So if they are exempt from filing, they're also exempt from training. But as long as they are a filer, they do have to take training. You can't be a filer and be exempt from the training requirements. They are linked.
Ooh, I have a point to make. Sorry.
You have a point to make.
We've been getting a lot of questions about this because of this huge exemption push. There are folks who now are going to say, oh, you have to file, but they now might want to try for individual exemptions, and that whole process can take a while, right? They have until when?
They have by May 15th.
Until May 15th. So we have said during that time, if they do get a training notice, that they can wait to do that because they may actually end up being exempt through the individual exemption. So gotten that maybe 2 or 3 times in the last few weeks. So know that, everybody.
Okay. So anybody who is applying for an individual exemption can wait until their exemption determination before pursuing their required ethics training. Thank you. I'm glad you thought of that. All right. So what is this ethics training requirement? The first for brand new filers is the OEO, the Online Ethics Orientation. It's the only class that we're allowed by law to have in an online environment. Right now, this orientation, this OEO, is in the form of a video. It's a 40-minute long overview video that tells a new filer just the basics of what the Public Officers Law requires of them as a new filer. They're supposed to watch this video within the first 3 months of becoming a filer. And we said becoming a filer is when you create their profile in the system, that's when all of these deadlines get started from the point a profile is created. So they have 3 months to go to our website to watch this little video. Usually it just happens right when you're onboarding and doing all of those other new staff member video trainings. And then they notify the ethics officer that they have completed that video OEO requirement, and that's how they meet that. The main ethics training requirement, however, is the famous CETC, the Comprehensive Ethics Training Course. This course is required by law to be a live class, which means it has to happen with a live instructor. It can happen either in a live classroom setting or in this kind of WebEx format. The key is that they have to be able to see the training materials and hear the trainer at the very least and be able to ask questions in real time. And that, I think, is the intent. And until the law changes, we have to kind of follow this format. We would all love to be able to just package this course and put it online so that people can click a link and take it on their own time. That would be great, but until the law changes, it's got to be live. So this is why it's really, really important for ethics officers to play a role in offering this training. You are in a better position to be able to offer live training to your staff members on an ongoing basis. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if somebody takes the CETC right away as a new filer, then they don't have to take the OEO. The CETC trumps the OEO. But somebody has up to 2 years to complete the CETC. So we don't want somebody in a high-ranking position for 2 years and be completely unaware of the ethics laws, which is why we have the orientation. All right? Now, once somebody has completed the CETC, then they are subject to live refresher training every 3 years after that. So they can meet that requirement by either retaking the CETC, because you're probably going to be offering it at least a couple of times a year. So you can just get everybody into the CETC, and that satisfies brand new people. It also satisfies people who need refresher training. But there is also a second course that we've developed called the Ethics Seminar, specifically designed as refresher training. That material is also on our website. We've put all of these course materials on the website in the Ethics Officer Info Center so that ethics officers can always download the most recent version of these materials. It includes a copy of the trainer notes, so you don't need to be an experienced trainer. You do not need to be particularly knowledgeable about ethics laws to offer this. Training functions is definitely something that many ethics officers delegate to staff members. It depends on the size of your agency and the resources that you have, but somebody in your agency needs to be offering the CETC on an ongoing basis to meet the training, this live training requirement for your FDS filers. The education unit is happy to talk you through things if you have any questions, concerns, or worries, but this is a really important way that we help filers meet this requirement. Now, we're also required to report to the governor's office on an annual basis how agencies are doing with this training requirement. So that's one of the reasons why we really depend on you to also keep your filers' training records updated in the FDS system. It used to be that we had you submit this big annual report that told us about all of the training status of all of your filers and who got trained that year, and it was a nightmare for everybody. And so now at least we're keeping track of training through the FDS system. The data entry is a lot easier, and just the regular management of training is a lot easier. So this is one of the reasons why we really do expect that you're going to be updating people's training records on an ongoing basis. I just promise you it's not any easier to just wait and do it all at the end of the year, and nobody's going to be happy about that. Your filers are going to get late notices until you update their training records that say they completed it. So help them out with that. All right, so what ethics officers do in regards to ethics training. So first of all, that notification. Notify your filers that they have an obligation to file an FDS and complete live ethics training. And again, do that before you create that profile, because otherwise the system starts spitting out automated notices that confuse them. Make sure that you're offering this course at regular intervals. And how regularly you do it depends on how many filers you have and, and what your agency resources are. But as I said, all of the training materials are available on our website in the Ethics Officer Info Center. There's also a section that I'll show you in the system that allows you to see at a glance who is coming due for training, so that you can proactively look ahead and say, oh, I see in the next 6 months I'm going to have 24 people who are going to come due. Maybe I should schedule something. So there's a place on the website that will allow you to keep track of who's coming due, who's already late, so that you can stay on top of that. And, of course, make sure that you have assigned staff who are going to be updating those training completion dates in the system on an ongoing basis. So those are the key things that we really need ethics officers to do there. The questions that people have here. How do I determine, when I'm updating the training, how do I determine which course to indicate? As I said, we have the CETC course, but we also have a separate course called the Ethics Seminar. So, important thing to know, if you're going to be updating training information, the CETC in the system is a very specific term. The CETC in the system means the first time they completed it. And that's because the law requires all new filers to take the CETC at least once. And so we track that first-time completion separately from all of their future ethics training. Now, they could continue to take the CETC every 3 years until they retire, and that's great. All future trainings are going to get recorded as Ethics Seminar Refresher. Only that very first time for new filers does it get recorded as the CETC. So that's the one thing that new people sometimes get a little confused on. It is an important distinction, though. And the system, though, is kind of set up to try to prevent you from screwing that up too badly. It won't let you put in dates in the wrong spot, or at least it shouldn't. Sometimes things go wrong. So just keep that in mind. All right, sometimes you'll see on a profile that it says tested out under the orientation requirement. And tested out just means that they completed the CETC first, because that is their primary obligation. So if they took the CETC, it means that they never have to go back and complete the orientation. A lot of agencies make sure that all of their new filers take the CETC within the first 3 months so that they don't have to worry about the orientation at all. And that's fine too. In fact, I would prefer that. I think the CETC is more valuable to people than an orientation because it really gives them the most complete information. Just as an FYI, if you are doing a lot of training management, you may see February 23rd, 2017 on a lot of your filers under that OEO date. And that was just kind of as we were building the system, we had to clean it up. Anybody who had already completed the CETC, but they didn't have anything for the orientation, the system just automatically tested all of those people out. So that was just kind of a data cleanup date, and you don't have to worry about it. Sometimes people are like, well, I didn't take the OEO, but it says that I have a date that I completed it in February of 2017. It's fine. It was just a system date. It's all good. If you are doing regular updates of training, there's a section of the website called the Filer Training Data Entry Screens. And that's where most of your management of training issues will happen. But every once in a while, we get a call saying, hey, I have a filer, but they're not showing up on my training screens. What gives? And there could be one of 3 reasons. First of all, check that filer's profile. They may be inactive or exempt. I mean, check, are they currently marked as on leave, but they're really back, but they haven't been updated yet, right? They won't show up on your list if they're inactive or exempt, because if they're inactive or exempt, they're also not subject to the training requirements. Only active, non-exempt filers are subject to training. Or your filer may be listed in 2 agencies and you're not the primary agency listed. So the training screens only list people who are associated as a primary agency for your agency. So every once in a while we have filers who are associated with more than one agency, so that might be it. Or the third option is there might be some sort of error on the filer's profile that's preventing them from showing up on those lists. In those kind of situations, if you're really experienced, go to their profile, see if you can figure it out. If you can't, give me a call, I'll help you figure it out, right? We do know that because of the way the system was built, you know, you would build the system as best as you could, and then you'd find something went wrong, but you didn't notice it until it screwed up some things. And then you fix the problem, but the data that got screwed up still lingers because you can't track it all down. So we know that just the history of building the system, there's going to be some data errors in there, and we just correct them as we find them. So if you find a problem on a filer's profile, don't worry about it. Give us a call. We have tools that will help you fix it. Can filers request a training extension? Yes. If they are getting close to a training deadline, or once somebody has passed a training deadline, they start receiving monthly late training reminder notices. People start getting a little bit verklempt over getting those notices. First of all, it's just a courtesy reminder notice. People need training every 3 years, and anybody would forget about that. So if they're late, they're going to start getting these monthly reminder notices. And that's okay, we just want to remind them that they have this thing that they have to do. But if getting those monthly notices makes them really nervous, they can go onto their profile. There's filers on their profile have a button that allows them to, with a click, request a training extension. So we look at them on a case-by-case basis, but generally speaking, we usually grant the extension. The ethics officer will be notified, as well as the filer, about those exemption or extension determinations. All right, so they get extended, their training due date gets extended by 3 months. They can request an extension twice. What happens to a filer's training history if they were inactive for some reason and then came back? So there could be a lot of reasons. They were on leave for a while and then came back. Maybe they left your agency, but they returned, or for whatever reason. If their profile was inactive and then they were reactivated, the general rule is, if they were gone for less than 1 year, then when they come back, their training deadline is extended by the amount of time that they were gone. So if they were gone for 3 months, their training due date is extended by 3 months. Easy peasy. But if they were gone for more than 1 year, and this does happen quite often, if they were gone for more than 1 year, then what we do is we reset their training history as though they were a new filer, which means we put a new CETC date on their profile and a new orientation date on their profile, and we give them all new due dates. What this generally does is it has the effect of giving somebody more time to complete that live training requirement. And the thinking is, if they've been gone for more than a year, it's possible that they may have missed any kind of significant changes in ethics laws or regulations while they were gone. So we want to make sure that we give them the opportunity to really get back up to speed when they come back. So that's it. Less than a year, it extends by the amount of time they're gone. More than a year, they're treated as a new filer for training purposes. All right, we get this a lot. Why do some filers have incorrect training due dates? We're looking at their profile and something doesn't seem right. And so generally speaking, these are a byproduct of all of those legacy bug problems that we've identified and fixed, but the data wasn't identified and fixed. So those almost always can be easily fixed. There is a known issue right now with filers who are being reactivated. I've been working with the developers just last week. They think they finally tracked down an error that was screwing up training due dates for filers who had their profile reactivated. So keep that in mind. So if you see somebody whose due dates just do not seem to be lining up, give us a call. I can help you diagnose it and can help you, fix those training dates. There's really nothing that can't be fixed, and we just find these things as we do. All right, so when you first log in, you're going to see that there is a menu bar at the top. We have this lovely gray on black color scheme for you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what each of those menu items contains so that you have a sense of what the system can do. All right? So now, first of all, some known system errors. Every once in a while, you'll get an error 123 message. That can come up for a number of different things. Sometimes that error message comes up when you're trying to update an account and the system kind of burps or something, it glitches. Sometimes all you need to do is just try to make your update again and it goes through. But if it doesn't clear up on its own, then reach out to us because maybe the system is down and we can tell you what to do about that. Also, we have noticed, although the developers tell us that the system should be compatible with all browsers, we also know anecdotally that that's not always true. So we have noticed that it does seem to be optimized for Internet Explorer and Firefox. I have no problem using Chrome, but some people have varied experiences with accessing the FDS system depending on their browser. It shouldn't be a compatibility issue, but sometimes if you have a filer who says that they're having problems, have them just try switching a browser to see if that changes things. I think it's a combination of a browser and the computer system settings that might sometimes throw errors, but we do the best we can with that. When you first log in as either an ethics officer or an agency contact, the first thing you're going to get is a dialog box. And this is to conform with the legal requirements of notification. So it says, please be advised that any changes made to add or remove a filer or to change a filer's description shall constitute an amendment to your agency's list of current filers. And that's just, like I said, to conform with legal language. Anytime there's a change, you technically have to amend that list that you certified to by the end of February. And when it used to be a paper thing, that used to be a big deal. Now that all of these changes can be easily updated on the computer, now your amendment is just clicking OK as you enter the system. That's all it is. It's an attestation that you're going to be accurate in what you do. So now, the first two buttons, actually, it says JCOPE FDS, or not buttons, but menu items. JCOPE FDS and dashboard both bring you back to your ethics officer dashboard. But the first real menu item is the search button. This search menu is really useful in helping you to navigate to your various FDS filers' profile pages, all right? So there's advanced search settings. So if you don't have the full name, you can search by part of the name, you can search by email or addresses, all sorts of different search criteria. But generally speaking, you can just put in a name and bring up a filer's profile, and that is easy peasy. Please make sure before adding a new filer that you search for them first to make sure that the filer isn't already added to your system. Maybe they have a profile in the system, but it's inactive right at the moment. So we have a problem with duplicate profiles when people are trying to add a new filer without being aware that a filer profile already exists. We want to make sure that a person's filing and training history stays with that person. So one first step is to search for them first, make sure that they don't already have a profile before you create one for them. Now, if you go to a filer's, if you use that search and you look up a filer, you will be brought to the filer's profile. And this is where you make edits to that particular filer. So you can see in the upper left-hand corner where it says filer, there's a little pencil. It can be hard to see. If you're getting to a certain age like I am, you might have to look for that little pencil, but that pencil is what allows you, it opens up all of the dialog boxes and allows you to make changes to the filer's information, like their email address, their phone number, their address, whatnot. The box to the right is agency, and this is what allows you to modify agency information like job title, salary, the designation, and their job status. And again, there's a little pencil next to that that allows you to do that. So there you go. So there's the little pencil on the right-hand side for the agency, and that allows you to remember. This is where you're going to like update people who go on leave, and then when they come back, people who leave entirely. Now, Don't be fooled. If you've updated their job status, for example, in the agency, on the bottom of the agency box, there's an update button. And sometimes people see that and they update, and then they navigate away from the page, and then they find out that the changes didn't stick, and they say, what happened? On this particular thing, you have to update the filer under the agency, and then you have to, in the lower left-hand corner, you have to update the entire profile. So it's a two-step authentication to make sure that the information sticks. All right? Now, on the filer's profile, all of the changes that you made there appear in there's a section of the filer's profile, I just kind of blocked it out here, called Personal Info History. And it lists all of the changes that were made to a filer's profile. But it's kind of like every day is opposite day in the profile history, because what you might see there, if you change somebody's address because they moved from Albany to Troy, then in the profile history, it will say address Albany, because that was their old address. So it tells you the thing that it used to be, not the thing that it changed to. And that can sometimes confuse people. So just know that that personal info history is a way that you can double check that the changes that you made to a filer's profile will appear. Now, below that personal info section is a section of the profile called the activity log. Happen, and place is the activity log. As a filer advances in their career, this activity log can get very lengthy. Every kind of action that pertains to a filer's status will appear in the activity log and can be hard to figure things out, which is why there's a row of buttons that allows you to filter that activity log according to the kind of information that you're looking for. I use the education filter all the time because if all I'm looking for is training information on a filer, that's how you get to there, all right? Now, this is the first place that you can update a filer's training information. You can do that right on their profile in the activity log. You find the open class, and in the last column under status, there will be a little pencil that allows you to enter a training completion date for that class. If you're only updating a couple of filers, it's usually easier to update them just straight on their profiles rather than on the data entry screen. So that's what the activity log is. Don't be intimidated by it, but lots of good actionable information are in there. One other thing that you can do is you can add a comment to a filer's profile in the activity log. But please note that those comments are not in any way sent to or alerted to JCOPE staff. So don't use the comment to notify us of important information. Those are more like notes to self. I use the comment field if I need to modify or correct an error in somebody's training dates. I'll put a little comment saying, I noticed an error and I corrected it, or something, so that someday later we can say, oh, why did she change that date? Oh, okay, because it was a problem. So those are more notes to self. Don't, if you have really important information that needs to be communicated to JCOPE, please drop us a line, give us a call. Don't use the comments for that. That's just clarifying information that's in the activity log. Right there above the activity log in that row of filters, the last button is the training override button. This is a very powerful tool for those of you who update training information, but with great power comes great responsibility. This override tool is to correct errors, and you'll find errors. You will make errors. We're all human. You fat finger a date, you enter it wrong, I mean, it happens. So the override is your tool to be able to fix the kinds of errors that you may find in a filer's training history, all right? So most of it is pretty self-explanatory. When you click that button, it opens up a box that shows the filer's training history. You have pencils next to the dates that you can modify. It allows you to add classes that may be missing. It allows you to delete classes. Also, one important thing there's a blue button within that override box called Send Schedule. So let's say you've entered a training completion date for somebody, but you got it wrong. Oops. One thing that happens, as soon as you enter a training completion date for a filer, the system automatically sends a notice to the filer saying, hey, filer, we see you completed training. Good job. But if you put in the wrong date, then the notice that they get will contain incorrect information. So you notice that you made a typo, you go into the override and you fix it, but then you use that Send Schedule button to send them an updated notice with the correct information. So it is a tool for you to be able to just easily and quickly notify a filer that something has changed in their training history. So one more tool to make your life a little easier. A filer's dashboard, when they log in, their view of their dashboard looks very different than the view you see as an FDS officer in the system. And they have two functions that do not appear in the ethics officer view, but it's important for you to be aware of so you can counsel them. For one thing, the filer has a button in the upper right-hand corner, a help button. And when they press that button, it gives them three options. One is to send an email to the ethics officers. The second is to send an email automatically to the FDS team. And the third is to send an email to the education unit. So if they have a question about their filing and they need to reach their ethics officer, they can do that. If they have a filing question and need to reach the FDS unit, or if they have a training question, they can reach us. So if you have a lot of needy filers, you can tell them to log in and click the help button, and that gives them a means to reach us directly. All right? Filers also have a button on their profile in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. That's the button that allows them to instantly request a training extension. So if they're getting those late notes, you send them to their profile and have them click that button, and they can get an extension on their training. Also in that, that lower left corner of a filer's profile, there's the filing box. It's kind of cut off in the screenshot. But that's also where a filer can find the buttons that will allow them to request an extension for filing or an exemption request. So that can all happen from a filer's dashboard. So we've gone through search and the filer's view. Now we go to add. Two things you can do under the add menu. The first is to add new filers. This is where you do that. Obviously, you click add filer. It opens up the dialog that allows you to add a new filer. Remember to use the search box first before you add a new filer. Make sure they don't already have a profile. The second, add officer, allows an ethics officer to add a new agency contact from their agency to help them manage FDS tasks. And honestly, that is the only difference between the ethics officer role and the agency contact role. An ethics officer can make new agency contacts. An agency contact cannot make other agency contacts. But other than that, an ethics officer and an agency contact have all of the same access rights to the system. So that's the add menu. Now, when you are adding a filer, as I mentioned, it's important that you search to make sure that they don't already have a profile, because we really want to try to avoid the creation of duplicate profiles. Yes, do you have something to say?
I do.
All right.
I got to here?
Yeah.
I'm so not dressed. I just want to say this. When you're adding a new filer, for the HR people, you may or may not know where they're coming from. So when you are doing a search, they may not come up in your search because it's their first time to your agency. They may already be in our system. If you're not sure, or if you do know they're coming from another agency, call us first and say, hey, does that person already have a profile? That way, when that box comes up on your screen, you will get a box when you do add that filer. A box will come up with their name and such, and it may be the prior agency name or whatever agency they came from. And if you're not sure, some people disregard it and go, oh, that's not them. And in case it is them, so you're creating a duplicate filer when you want to create a new filer, and then we're the only ones who can remove that filer. So if you don't let us know, we're going after that person thinking, okay, that other person is the right person, and your new person is another person, and actually it's the same person. So if you're not sure that person that you're bringing on board came from another agency or another place, if they've already filed with us, call us, find out first. If they're already in the system and we can tell you, then we can tell you about how to go and add them in the system.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was Tanisha, one of our filing specialists, and really the person who is probably most directly responsible for untangling these duplicate profiles. So we do want to try to make sure that we are keeping our records as clean and clear as possible. So as she pointed out, you know, if you've got a new staff member who's coming from a different agency, they may still have a profile that won't show up for you, but we do ask you to search. So when you try to add a new filer, the system's going to automatically do a search for you to see whether or not there's a potential match. And so review that list. At least start there and review that list. If there is a match, there's an icon to the left that you click on, and any changes that you made will get merged with that profile that was discovered. If it's not a match, click New Filer unless you have reason to believe that they really might have a profile, in which case just pause and call us first, because it is easier to, it's easier to take care of that up front than to try to fix a duplicate profile afterwards. We don't want to create any confusion for filers. I think I just pretty much ran through the differences of agency officer or ethics officer and agency contact. Both roles do have those full edit permissions. You can have as many ethics officers and agency contacts as you want. JCOBE creates a new ethics officer in the system, though. So if you want to add a new ethics officer, give us a call and we'll help get those profiles created. But ethics officers are the ones that can create new agency contacts, right? So if you're an ethics officer, you can designate as many hopeful staff members as you like, all right? If you need to remove an ethics officer or an agency contact, though, give us a call. That's something that the FDS unit does. We have to uncouple those permissions. That's not something you can do on your end. So give us a call and we will remove them. All right, the next menu item is the certification menu. This is the first item on that list is the FDS Filer certification. This is the big certification that you have to do by the end of February. This is that button that you click to certify your list. The real work is in reviewing your list and updating your filers and verifying the information. That is the big research project. But once you are done and you know that your list is as accurate as you can make it, then you go to certification and that first option. You have to let us know whether you're certifying your academic list or your non-academic list. So click that button. But when you're ready, you click your View Agency Filer, and then right at the lower left, Certify Agency. You click, and you're done. Do it by the end of February, the 28th. All right, so the next menu item below that filer certification is the whole home of all of the ethics training data is under Filer Training Data Entry, the FTDE screens. This will give you a multiple number of screens. This whole section was created to allow you to do batch data entry. So if you conduct a training class and you get 30 staff members in, this allows you to update all 30 staff members in just a few clicks, so that you don't have to go to every individual profile and update the training records. So it's designed to be a tool to make that data entry easier. But it also gives you the opportunity to download information so that you can manage your filers and manage your reporting. So let me show you some of these. Now, let me back up here. When you first go to this section, it defaults to the all view, which gets very visually cluttered, and I'm going to confess I never really use the all view, except all of the names in the list can be clicked on to bring you immediately to their profile. So it is convenient for navigation. Also, one thing to know in this section, every single column is sortable. So it defaults to the list putting it in FDS ID order, which makes no sense because none of us use that number. But if you click on the name, it automatically sorts your list alphabetically, and that is usually how most people roll. So there's that tip. So it defaults to the all view, but you're probably going to be wanting to go to the other screens for actual maintenance. So the first screen is the OEO completion screen. This allows you to enter OEO completion dates. Now, you probably won't need to do batch data entry unless you have a whole group of people who started at the same time and you put them all in a room together and have them watch the orientation video together. Most people take this on their own, so you're just going to be doing this individually. But it allows you to select multiple people if you want, or just an individual. And at the bottom left of the screen, you enter a completion date and hit enter. Boom, easy peasy. We tried really hard to make this kind of intuitive. Now, the next radio button along the top brings you to the CETC screens. And just keep in mind, this is for new filers for the first time they took the CETC only, all right? These screens will gray out and won't let you enter a second CETC on these screens. So this is just for your first time people only. So just good to know, if you are conducting a training class that has new filers and people for refresher training, you will want to divide those lists because they get entered here separately. But the lower left-hand corner, you enter the completion date, and there's a new option now. CLE credit. CLE stands for Continuing Legal Education Credit, and some agencies are able to offer CLE credit for attorneys who complete this course. Not all agencies can, some agencies do. So it defaults to no, but if you are an agency who offers CLE credits for courses, this is a place where you can keep track so you can know whether or not you've issued CLE credits to a filer or not. Okay? So you enter the date and hit enter. That's how you do those CETC buttons. Just also to show you, up at the top, I have it circled in red, the orange button called Edit. You can also edit training dates from here too. If you made an error, you don't have to go to a filer's profile, especially if you did a whole bunch of errors. You can also edit incorrect completion dates from this screen as well. The next view is the seminar refresher training screen. Once people have taken the CETC for the first time, all future training dates will be recorded on this screen. So again, you see the people's names, you click how many people, you put the little check mark next to their name, and then you add the class type. That's the new box here. When somebody has taken refresher training, this screen is going to ask them, okay, they took training. What class did they take? Did they take the CETC class or the seminar class? Most agencies just only ever do the CETC, but you can tell, this is where you can tell if this is the second or third or fourth time they've taken the CETC. So you can mark down which class they took here, the completion date, and click enter, and you're good to go. So these are the screens where you can enter training completion dates for large groups of people. Now the next and the last screen here, though, this is the gold mine if you are managing training for your agency, because upcoming allows you to monitor people who are already overdue or people who are coming due for training. You click the due date column and it sorts your entire list by due date. Anybody who's already overdue, their due date will appear in red, but this also is the list that gives you an email address. So this gives you a really convenient way of creating a distribution list to reach out to filers and say, hey, we see that you're already past due or you're coming due in the next 6 months. We've got a training scheduled for next month. We want you to come. Right? You can download this into a spreadsheet so you can manipulate the data. This upcoming screen tends to be one of the most popular screens for people who are managing training. All right, the last item under certification is training officers. This allows you to decide who in your agency is going to receive training notices. We know that quite often people who manage the information for FDS filers is different from the people who manage the training functions. And we do send out a number of training notices. And so this screen just allows you to designate who in your agency is going to receive training-related notices. There has to be at least one person in your agency with that training indicator on, but it allows you to turn off training notices for people who really have no reason to need to see all of those emails. All right, next is reports. You've got a few different reports that are available to you. The first report is your active or inactive filer report. So I mentioned earlier that you can look at a list of all of your active filers, but if you're doing data checking and reconciliation, you can also look at a list of your inactive filers to make sure that you've gotten all of your updates done. So that's what that first report is. The second report is your agency report. This lists all of your active filers in your agency, and it gives a more expanded view. So if you are reconciling and verifying information, it gives things like designation, job title, salary. So it gives you a resource to be able to have a printed list to be able to double check information. This can be really helpful when you are reviewing your certification list. And then the last is the ethics officer filers list. This allows you to filter your active filers within a specific date range. And this is just one more tool that we give you in order for you to do the kind of data mining that you might want to do in order to verify your active list. Those are your reports, but stay tuned there as we develop the system. There may be more reports that we create that will be helpful to you. If you have a suggestion, let us know. The last menu item is preferences, and this allows you to change the color scheme. Isn't that exciting? If this gray on black is not to your preference, you can change the color scheme to smoke or cream. But it's really more of a placeholder that this is another menu item that if we expand functionality, it would be another area that we could use for that. So, that's what preferences does. If you prefer a different color, there you go. Okay, so contact information. We have a 1-800 number and a local number, but if you need to reach the FDS unit, you call that 1-800 number and press 3 for FDS, for the FDS unit. You could also call that 1-800 number and press 2 to reach the attorney of the day. So if you're an ethics officer that has ethics questions, that is a one-stop shop number for you. If you need to reach out to the FDS unit, Ethel is not a person who does not exist, but Ethel is the email address that reaches the FDS unit. So people often say, well, who is Ethel anyway? I think it's just the name of a former legacy computer system that does not exist anymore, but we've just kept the name. So reach out to Ethel, and somebody from the FDS unit will get back to you. If you have questions about any training issues, or you need to talk about how to develop your training program, or if you have problems with any kind of training data, reach out to education@jcope.ny.gov. So those are your contact information. We really are here to help. Look, managing this FDS process can be really involved. It can involve a lot of details and a lot of personnel and a lot of staff. And the laws are what they are, but we're here to help you. This is not an adversarial thing. We are all working together to try to make this all work for these filers and make it possible for them to meet this obligation and still do the excellent work that they're doing on behalf of the state of New York. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you have questions or concerns or any way that we can help make this process better for you, let us know. We will do what we can. I thank you all very much for being with us here today, and we look forward to contacting you soon. So thanks, everybody. Thank you for being with us.